A legendary sword of immense power simply vanished into thin air. This is the enduring mystery of Excalibur, the mythical blade of King Arthur. By the end of this journey, you will understand the incredible forces, both human and divine, that conspired to erase this iconic artifact from our world. We will investigate the dying king's final command and the mystical hand that rose from a lake to reclaim its prize. We will follow the trail from ancient manuscripts to modern archaeology, searching for any trace of the lost sword. What does the disappearance of such a powerful symbol truly mean for us today long before it vanished? Excalibur was born from the mists of legend. Its story first appeared in the pages of Geoffrey of Monmouth's History of the Kings of Britain, a work that blended ancient lore with creative history. Here, the sword was not yet named Excalibur, but it was already a blade of immense power and significance. The tale was later woven with richer magic by poets like Chrétien de Troyes, who gave us the name Excalibur and deepened its mystical connections. It was Thomas Malory, however, who cemented the legend we know today in his monumental work, Le Morte d'Arthur. He presented the sword's origin not in a stone, but in a moment of pure enchantment. A hand cloaked in white samite rose from the still waters of a mystical lake, offering the magnificent blade to the future king. This was no ordinary transaction. It was a divine bestowal. The sword itself bore an inscription, a promise etched into the steel for only the rightful ruler to read. "Whoso pulleth out this sword of this stone and anvil is rightwise king born of all England." This was not merely a test of strength, but a celestial endorsement. Excalibur became the ultimate symbol of rightful sovereignty. To wield it was to hold a contract with the divine, a visible sign that God and ancient magic had chosen you to lead. Its brilliant blade was more than a weapon. It shone with the light of legitimacy, and its scabbard held a power even greater than the sword itself, protecting the bearer from mortal wounds. This is precisely why its disappearance resonates so deeply. The loss of Excalibur was not just a king losing his sword. It was the shattering of a covenant, the withdrawal of divine favor from the land. When the sword vanished, it took with it the very idea of a perfect, righteous rule, leaving behind a world forever wondering where that light had gone. But where does legend end and history begin? To understand the power of this myth, we must journey back to the stark reality of post-Roman Britain, a land stripped of its legions and plunged into chaos. Around the 5th and 6th centuries, the Roman Empire withdrew its protection, leaving the island vulnerable to invasion and internal strife. It was a time of darkness and fragmentation, a period so poorly documented that it truly is a historical twilight. Into this void steps a possible inspiration for our legendary king. Chroniclers like Gildas wrote of Ambrosius Aurelianus, a Roman-British war leader who won a series of crucial battles against Saxon invaders. He was a figure of light in a dark age, a man fighting to preserve a crumbling civilization. He was not called Arthur, but his victories laid the groundwork for a legend desperate for a hero. This is the fertile ground where the story of Excalibur took root. In an era of such immense uncertainty, people longed for a symbol of order, a divine right to rule that could push back the encroaching darkness. The idea of a sword bestowed by a higher power offered hope that the world was not just descending into random violence, that there was still a plan, a chosen one. We can almost touch this world at places like Tintagel Castle in Cornwall. The rugged ruins perched on the Atlantic cliffs are steeped in Arthurian lore, and archaeology has revealed it was a significant stronghold of a powerful Celtic ruler in precisely this post-Roman period. Finding fragments of fine Mediterranean pottery there tells us this was not some backward outpost, but a place connected to wider trade and culture, a place fit for a king. The legend of Arthur and his magical sword did not spring from nothing. It was a story crafted from the deep yearning of a people caught between the lost glory of Rome and a frightening, unknown future. The sword became the answer to a collective prayer for a leader who was not just strong, but right. This enigmatic figure, the Lady of the Lake, is far more than a simple arm extended from the water. She is the heart of the sword's mystery, a being known by many names that each hint at a profound nature. She is Nimue, the sorceress of the forest, and Viviane, the mistress of enchantment. Her identity shifts like mist on the water, reflecting her role as the guardian of a world older than kings and kingdoms, a world of deep pre-Christian magic. She first appears as a giver, her hand rising from the still surface to present the magnificent Excalibur to the young Arthur. This was not a gift freely given, but a sacred loan. The sword was always hers, a power entrusted to a mortal king for a specific purpose, and when that purpose was fulfilled, she became the taker. In the tragic aftermath of Arthur's final battle at Camlann, the dying king gives a solemn command. Sir Bedivere is tasked with returning the sword to the water. After 2 failed attempts, he finally hurls the brilliant blade into the lake. That same hand emerges, catches the sword by the hilt, brandishes it 3 times, and then vanishes beneath the dark water, taking Excalibur forever from the world of men. This complete cycle from bestowal to reclamation defines her. She does not represent the chaotic magic of fairy tales, but the ancient cyclical order of nature itself. She is the spirit of the land, its waters, and its deep, silent power. By giving Arthur the sword, she binds him to the land's well-being. By taking it back, she signals that his time and the age of that particular magic has come to a close. Her actions remind us that the power to rule, the very right of sovereignty, was once believed to flow directly from the earth and its hidden guardians. The disappearance of Excalibur was not a theft but a withdrawal. The old magic was receding, making way for a new world, leaving behind a legend that forever asks what other powers might still sleep, forgotten, in the deep, silent waters of our own world. The battlefield at Camlann was a tapestry of mud and blood. This was not a glorious clash of chivalry, but a desperate, brutal end to a dream. King Arthur, his heart shattered by the betrayal of his own son, Mordred, led his weary knights into a fight that none could win. The air was thick with the cries of men and the clash of steel on steel. In the midst of the chaos, father and son found each other. Their final confrontation was swift and terrible. Arthur drove his spear deep into Mordred, a killing blow. But with his last breath, the traitor thrust himself forward along the shaft, bringing himself close enough to swing his own sword in a final, hateful arc. The blade found its mark, striking a grievous wound in the king's head. Arthur fell, the world dissolving around him into a haze of pain and loss. The dream of Camelot died on that field with him, its last light flickering out in the rain and the mire. This mortal wound, this final failure of his own body, made the scabbard's lost protection a cruel memory. It also set into motion the most sacred of duties, a king's last command that would seal the fate of his most powerful relic and change the course of legend forever. Sir Bedivere alone remained at his king's side on that desolate field. Arthur, his life fading, gave a final, whispered command: "Take Excalibur to the water's edge and cast it in." This was more than an order. It was a sacred trust, a test of loyalty against the pull of earthly power. Bedivere took the legendary sword and walked toward the nearby lake, its dark surface shimmering under a bruised sky. But as he held the magnificent hilt, he hesitated. The jeweled pommel glittered in his hand. This was not just a weapon. It was the very soul of Britain, the symbol of a golden age. To throw it away felt like a betrayal of everything they had fought for. It felt like surrendering all hope. So when he reached the shore, he hid the sword among the reeds and returned to his king. "I threw it, my lord," he said. Arthur, his eyes still sharp with a fading light, saw the lie in his knight's face. "What did you see?" he asked. Bedivere, shamed, could only say he saw nothing but wind on the water. "Go again," the king commanded, his voice strained, "and do as I have bid you." A second time, Bedivere went to the water. A second time he stood at the brink, holding the power of kings in his hands. The thought of such a treasure lost to the deep was an unbearable weight. He turned away, leaving Excalibur beneath a thorny bush. He returned to Arthur with the same false tale. The dying king's voice was a rasp of disappointment and pain. "You have betrayed me twice. For the love of our bond, do not fail me again. Go swiftly and do not disobey." This third journey was different. The weight of his disloyalty crushed him more than the sword ever could. He understood now that this was not about discarding a treasure, but about completing a cycle. It was about returning a power to its source, acknowledging that the age of that magic was over. He took Excalibur from its hiding place, and this time, without a moment of doubt, he drew back his arm and hurled the brilliant blade in a great arc over the water. And then the impossible happened. A hand and an arm, clothed in white samite, rose from the still center of the lake. It caught the sword by the hilt, brandished it 3 times in a silent, majestic farewell, and then withdrew beneath the dark surface, taking Excalibur from the world forever. Bedivere stood in awe, finally understanding that his king's command was not an end, but a necessary, sacred return. That single, silent gesture over the lake was a message in itself. The arm clad in that pristine white samite was a vision of deliberate purpose. Samite was no common cloth. It was a heavy, luxurious silk, often interwoven with gold or silver threads, reserved for royalty and the most sacred of rituals. Its brilliant white color was not merely for show. It symbolized purity, a divine authority utterly untouched by the blood and grime of the mortal world below. This was not the hand of a monster or a ghost. It was the hand of a custodian, an agent of an order that existed long before Camelot and would endure long after. The threefold brandishing of the sword was the final seal on this sacred transaction. In the symbolism of that era, the number 3 represented completion and perfection. Think of the 3 attempts Bedivere made, the 3 days Christ spent in the tomb, or the Holy Trinity itself. Each rise and fall of the blade was a silent pronouncement. The first may have acknowledged the sword's faithful service in the world of men. The second likely signified the end of its contract, the release of Arthur's right to wield it. And the third, the final withdrawal, was a blessing, a closing of the circle, returning the blade to the eternal keeping of the deep. This was not a theft or a loss in the ordinary sense. It was a reclamation. The power that had been loaned was now being formally and ceremoniously recalled. The world of Arthur, with its codes of chivalry and dreams of a perfect kingdom, had reached its terminus. The magic was folding back in on itself, retreating from a humanity that had proven itself not yet ready to hold such power without corruption. The lake was not a grave for a sword. It was a vault, and the arm in white samite was its eternal guardian, leaving us to wonder if such power sleeps still, waiting for a time when it might be needed again. As the waters closed over Excalibur, another profound mystery unfolded on the shore. A lone barge, draped in black and steered by figures both mournful and majestic, glided silently to the bank. This was not a vessel of war, but a funeral ship, and its destination was a place beyond the maps of men. The wounded king was carried gently aboard, his journey to the mythical Isle of Avalon just beginning. Avalon was no ordinary island. Its name translates to the Isle of Apples, a symbol of eternal life and healing in Celtic lore. It was a place shrouded in perpetual mist, a realm where time itself seemed to slow its relentless march. Here, it was said, Arthur's grievous wounds would be tended to by powerful enchantresses, most famously his own sister, Morgan Le Fay, who transformed from a sometime adversary into a compassionate healer in his final hours. This departure is the final, crucial piece of the puzzle. The fate of the king and the fate of his sword are 2 halves of the same story, bound together by a single, powerful thread of destiny. Just as Excalibur was withdrawn from the world to be preserved in a state of perfect potential, so too was Arthur taken from the field of death to a place of suspended animation. He did not die in the way ordinary men die. He was instead translated, carried away to sleep until the hour of his people's greatest need. This is the powerful, enduring hope at the heart of the legend. The king is not gone, the sword is not lost, they are simply waiting. They exist in a state of readiness, preserved in the timeless vault of Avalon and the deep waters of the lake, waiting for the moment when the old magic must once again awaken. The legend assures us that the power for a golden age is never truly destroyed. It is only held in trust, a seed buried deep in the earth and the collective memory of a people, waiting for the right conditions to sprout once more. The first whispers of the sword's fate are not found in grand tales of magic, but in the sparse, grim entries of ancient chronicles. The Annals Cambriae, the Annals of Wales, mark the year 537 with a stark, chilling line. The strife of Camlann, in which Arthur and Medrawd fell. There is no mention of a sword, no glorious last stand, only the cold, hard fact of a battle and a death. This raw historical fragment is the bleak foundation upon which the legend was later built. It speaks only of an end. Then, centuries later, Geoffrey of Monmouth transforms this historical footnote into a destiny. In his History of the Kings of Britain, the story deepens and takes on a supernatural hue. He writes of Arthur's mortal wound and his departure for the Isle of Avalon to be healed of his wounds. While Geoffrey does not detail the sword's return to the lake, he establishes the crucial, transformative idea that the king's story did not end on the battlefield. This was the seed. The loss of the king and the fading of his era were being framed not as a simple military defeat, but as a departure, a translation to a place beyond mortal understanding. This shift in the narrative was profound. The sword, as the symbol of his power, could not simply be left behind on a bloody field or locked in a dusty treasure chest. Its story had to end with the same sense of mystery and purpose as the king's own. If Arthur was taken to a mystical isle to await his return, then his blade, the very source of his right to rule, had to be secured in a similarly timeless vault. These early records set the stage for the full, majestic myth. They teach us that the disappearance of Excalibur was never recorded as a mere misplacement. From its very first echoes in history, it was presented as a pivotal, supernatural event, a necessary closing of a divine contract that left the world waiting, forever listening for the whisper of its return. Centuries after the mists of Avalon closed around the king, a very different kind of discovery sent shockwaves through medieval England. In the year 1191, monks at Glastonbury Abbey made a stunning announcement. While digging in their cemetery, they claimed to have unearthed a massive hollowed-out oak log, and inside it the skeletal remains of a gigantic man and a woman. A lead cross was found with the bodies, inscribed in Latin. Here lies buried the famous King Arthur with Guinevere, his second wife, in the Isle of Avalon. The timing of this miraculous find was, to say the least, convenient. Just a few years earlier, a devastating fire had swept through the abbey, destroying much of its structure and, crucially, its source of income from pilgrims. The monks were in desperate need of funds and a renewed stream of devoted visitors. What better way to achieve this than to unearth the most famous king in British legend, right there on their own holy ground? This was not just an archaeological claim. It was a brilliant piece of spiritual public relations. By proclaiming they had found Arthur's final resting place, the monks of Glastonbury effectively anchored the mythical, ever-elusive Isle of Avalon to a specific, tangible location, their own abbey. They transformed their fire-ravaged institution into the ultimate pilgrimage site, a place where the faithful could come and stand at the very grave of the once and future king. The financial and political motivations were clear. Donations from nobles and commoners alike began to pour in, funding the abbey's magnificent reconstruction. But in this calculated narrative, a crucial element was conspicuously absent. Where was Excalibur? The monks made no claim to have found the legendary sword alongside the king. This silence speaks volumes. If they were fabricating a story for maximum impact, why omit the most iconic artifact of all? Perhaps even they understood that the sword's destiny, as written in the old tales, was too powerful to contradict. The legend said the sword was returned to the lake, not buried in the earth. To claim otherwise would have stretched their own credibility too far. The monks were happy to provide a body for Arthur, grounding his myth in a physical tomb, but they wisely left the mystery of Excalibur untouched, allowing its greater, more magical disappearance to endure. The monks of Glastonbury did more than just unearth a king. They cultivated a landscape of sacred relics, each one deepening the mystery surrounding Arthur's lost sword. Just a short walk from the purported royal grave lies the Chalice Well, a spring of iron-red water that has flowed uninterrupted for centuries. Local tradition holds a breathtaking claim that this is the very well where Joseph of Arimathea hid the Holy Grail after his journey to Britain. The water's distinctive red hue is often symbolically linked to the blood of Christ, a permanent stain of divine sacrifice upon the land. This connection creates a powerful web of Arthurian artifacts, all converging on this one small corner of England. We have the king's body, the Grail's hiding place, and yet conspicuously absent is his sword. This very absence forces us to confront a common confusion that has clouded the legend for generations. Many people believe the sword Excalibur is the very same blade Arthur pulled from the stone, but the myths are very clear on this point. They are two completely different artifacts with two separate destinies. The sword in the stone was a test. Its magic was singular and specific, a divine mechanism to identify the true king. Once Arthur drew it forth, the sword's purpose was fulfilled. It fades from the story, its power spent. Excalibur, given by the Lady of the Lake, was something else entirely. It was a tool of active kingship, a weapon of unparalleled sharpness, and a scabbard of profound protection. Its power was ongoing, a constant companion to the king throughout his reign. This crucial distinction makes its final journey back to the lake so meaningful. The sword in the stone, a mere test, could be forgotten, but Excalibur, a living power loaned from the earth itself, had to be returned. It was too potent, too sacred, to be left to rust in a tomb or be seized as a trophy by a lesser man. Its disappearance into the water was the only fitting end for a force that was never truly meant to be owned, only stewarded for a time. So while Glastonbury offers a grave for a king and a well for a chalice, it wisely offers no crypt for the sword, leaving its deeper mystery to the keeping of the silent, dark water. The search for Excalibur's echoes leads us deep into the misty hills of Wales, to a collection of stories even older than the tales of Camelot. Within the ancient texts of the Mabinogion, a treasure trove of Welsh mythology, we find a sword that feels hauntingly familiar. Its name is Dynwen, and it possesses a life of its own. This was no ordinary blade. Described as white-hilted, it was a sword of judgment that would burst into flame from cross to tip when drawn by a man of noble worth. Imagine the sight, a righteous fire blazing in the hand of a true leader. This fiery attribute was not a mere weapon enhancement. It was a divine lie detector, a physical manifestation of the wielder's inner virtue and rightful claim to power. A coward or a tyrant could not hope to command its flames. This concept of a sentient, judgmental weapon predates the refined chivalry of Arthur's court by centuries, rooted in a much older, wilder Celtic world. These early myths were not concerned with the pageantry of kingship, but with the raw, untamed relationship between a leader and the land itself. The power to rule was not a political appointment. It was a sacred condition, a state of being that the land and its ancient magic would either accept or reject. Dynwen's fire was that acceptance made visible. When we place Excalibur beside Dynwen, the parallels are impossible to ignore. Both swords are far more than simple steel. They are active participants in the destiny of their bearers. Excalibur's brilliant, unbreakable blade and its life-preserving scabbard serve a similar function to Dynwen's flame. They are a visible, tangible sign of divine favor, a supernatural endorsement that sets the true king apart from all other warriors. The magic of these blades confirms a fundamental belief of the ancient Celts, that the right to lead was bestowed by forces deeper and older than any human crown. So, where did the fiery sword of judgment go, and how did it transform into the luminous sword of the lake? The answer lies in the evolution of the stories themselves. As the original Welsh and Celtic legends traveled across the English Channel, they were refined and reshaped by Norman and French poets. These writers, steeped in the emerging codes of chivalry and courtly love, softened the wild, primal magic of the old gods. The untamed, punishing fire of Dyrnwyn was gradually polished into the elegant, righteous light of Excalibur. The core idea remained, a sword that proves a king is chosen. But its expression changed from a dramatic, dangerous flame to a constant, calming radiance, better suited to the ideal of a just and gentle Christian ruler. The disappearance of Excalibur, then, is not just the end of one sword's story. It is the final, fading echo of that older, fiery magic, its last spark extinguished not in flame, but in the deep, cool, forgiving waters of the lake. Across the English Channel, the raw Celtic legends of Arthur underwent a remarkable transformation. French poets, enthralled by these British tales, began to weave them into something new, something that would define the myth for centuries to come. The most influential of these figures was Chrétien de Troyes, writing for the sophisticated courts of 12th century France. In his hands, the story of Arthur was no longer just about a war chief and his magical weapons. Chrétien introduced a new, powerful force into the narrative, the code of chivalry and the intricate rituals of courtly love. His knights were not merely warriors. They were lovers and poets, embarking on perilous quests not just for glory, but to win the favor of a noble lady. This was a profound shift. The value of a knight was now measured not only by his strength in battle, but by his courtesy, his loyalty, and his refined manners. Imagine the stark contrast between the fiery, judgmental sword Dyrnwyn of the old Welsh tales and the world Chrétien created. In his romances, the magic of the land was polished and repurposed. It became the backdrop for personal adventure and spiritual refinement. While Chrétien himself did not focus extensively on Excalibur, the atmosphere he created was essential. He set the stage for the sword to become more than a tool of war or a symbol of divine right. It was on the path to becoming an emblem of the perfect knight, a physical representation of the chivalric ideals he was helping to invent. The sword's power began to intertwine with the knight's personal virtue, a connection that would only deepen in the works that followed. This evolution was dramatically expanded by the anonymous authors of the vast Vulgate cycle, also known as the Lancelot Grail cycle. This monumental collection of prose works written in the early 13th century did nothing less than systematize the entire Arthurian universe. It provided a detailed history, a sprawling cast of characters, and a cohesive, almost theological framework for the legend. It was within the pages of the Vulgate cycle that the story of Excalibur received some of its most crucial and enduring details. The writers explicitly separated the sword in the stone from the sword given by the Lady of the Lake, cementing a distinction that clarified the blade's unique destiny. But their most significant contribution was the elaboration of the scabbard's power. They emphasized that this simple leather and gold case was, in fact, more valuable than the sword itself, for it protected the bearer from losing any blood. This was a powerful metaphor. In a world now governed by chivalric codes, the greatest power was not the ability to inflict wounds, but the ability to remain invulnerable, to be a bastion of unwavering virtue and strength. The scabbard represented preservation, the maintenance of the king's life, and by extension, the health of the entire kingdom. Its eventual loss, stolen by Morgan Le Fay before the final battle, became a tragic turning point. It meant that Arthur was no longer protected. He was rendered mortal, vulnerable to the betrayals and failures of the human world. This narrative choice by the French authors added a layer of profound tragedy and moral consequence to the myth. The loss of the scabbard was not just a piece of magic being misplaced, it was the failure of chivalry itself, the moment when human frailty and treachery overcame divine protection. By the time these French romances had done their work, Excalibur was forever changed. It had been refined from a symbol of raw, ancient power into a complex icon of chivalric idealism, royal responsibility, and poignant human vulnerability. The sword we picture today, gleaming with the light of a lost golden age, is in many ways a French creation, a testament to the power of story to reshape our deepest myths. Sir Thomas Malory, writing from a prison cell in the 15th century, wove all the scattered threads of the legend into one magnificent, tragic tapestry. His work, Le Morte d'Arthur, did not simply tell a story. It gave the tale its final, enduring shape, becoming the version that would echo through the centuries and define the myth for the English-speaking world. Malory took the French romances with their intricate codes of chivalry and infused them with a distinctly English spirit of solemn gravity and moral consequence. In his hands, the disappearance of Excalibur was no longer just a magical event. It became a profound human drama, a test of loyalty played out against the backdrop of a dying dream. He focused with meticulous care on the three journeys of Sir Bedivere, transforming a simple command into an epic of hesitation and ultimate obedience. The first two attempts are not just failures, they are a portrait of a man utterly captivated by the weight of history he holds in his hands. Malory makes us feel the agony of that choice, the sheer impossibility of throwing away the last physical remnant of Camelot. We understand Bedivere's struggle because Malory forces us to confront what we might have done in his place. Would we have the strength to surrender such a symbol, to admit that an era was truly, irrevocably over? The third journey, then, is not merely an act of following orders, it is a moment of spiritual awakening. When Bedivere finally hurls the sword, it is an act of release, an acceptance of a greater, more cyclical order of the world. Malory's description of the arm clad in white samite rising from the lake is stark and majestic, a vision of pure, otherworldly authority reclaiming what was always its own. This was the version that sealed the sword's fate in the popular imagination. By giving Bedivere's internal conflict such depth, Malory elevated the sword's return from a plot point to a timeless parable about duty, legacy, and the difficult art of letting go. His book became the bridge carrying the legend out of the medieval world and into the modern one, ensuring that the mystery of the sword lost to the water would haunt us forever. The dark, still water of the lake is far more than a hiding place. It is a living symbol, one of the most powerful and ancient in the human imagination. In myths from every corner of the world, water represents the great unknown, the boundary between the world we see and the one we can only feel. It is the source of all life, a place of both creation and dissolution, of profound cleansing and impenetrable mystery. This is why the Lady of the Lake is not merely a character, but an embodiment of the landscape itself. Her home is the subconscious of the world, the deep, silent reservoir of memory, magic, and primordial power. When she offered Excalibur from its surface, she was drawing a power from the very wellspring of existence, lending it to a mortal king for a time. And when she reclaimed it, she was not throwing it away. She was returning a sacred tool to its source, like a river flowing back into the sea. The choice of a lake, specifically, is crucial. Unlike a rushing river or a vast ocean, a lake is contained, reflective, and deeply still. Its surface can act as a perfect mirror to the world above, while its depths remain secret and unseen. It holds duality within itself, representing both the conscious mind, which reflects the light of day, and the vast, dark subconscious that lies beneath. To entrust something to a lake is to place it beyond the reach of ordinary hands, preserving it in a state of timeless potential. Think of the way a calm lake perfectly mirrors the sky and trees, creating a world that is familiar yet inverted. This is the realm of the lady. She exists in that reflective boundary, able to interact with both the world of men and the world of pure spirit. By giving the sword to Arthur, she brought a spark of that deep, subconscious magic into the light of day, allowing it to shape a kingdom. By taking it back, she acknowledged that the time for that particular light had passed, and the power needed to be reabsorbed into the collective dream of the land, waiting to be dreamed again. This act also connects deeply to the idea of the divine feminine, a force often associated with water, intuition, and the cyclical nature of life. The lady is not a warrior goddess, but a nurturer and a keeper of mysteries. Her power is not about conquest, but about balance and renewal. She gives and she takes away, all in the service of a greater, natural order that mortals can barely comprehend. The disappearance of Excalibur into the water is not a defeat. It is a ritual of completion, a symbolic immersion that washes the sword clean of the blood and politics of Camelot, returning it to a state of pure, untarnished potential, sleeping in the subconscious of the world until the dream of a just king stirs once more. The dark water that swallowed Excalibur has not dampened the human desire to find it. This ancient mystery has sparked a modern quest, a blend of romantic hope and scientific curiosity that plays out across the British landscape. Amateur treasure hunters, armed with metal detectors and dog-eared copies of Le Morte d'Arthur, regularly sweep the shores of lakes long associated with the legend. Their primary targets are two bodies of water in Cornwall, Dosmery Pool and Low Pool. Dosmery Pool is a bleak, lonely tarn on the moors of Bodmin, a place of stark beauty that feels utterly detached from time. Its deep, peaty waters match the description of a lake that could hold a secret for centuries. Low Pool, near the town of Helston, is a larger, more dramatic barrier lake separated from the sea by a shingle bar. Local folklore here is particularly strong, insisting this is the true location where Bedivere fulfilled his king's final command. These enthusiasts scan the muddy banks and shallow margins, their electronic devices buzzing, each signal a potential heartbeat from the past. They dream of the ultimate find, a glint of corroded steel that is not a lost fishing lure or a piece of farm machinery, but the hilt of a king's sword. Yet for all their passion, these searches yield little more than modern debris, the mundane detritus of contemporary life scattered over a mythical landscape. The real challenge is the nature of the legend itself. How does one use a metal detector to find an object that was returned not to the earth but to a realm of pure enchantment? The very act of searching with such tools feels almost contrary to the spirit of the story, an attempt to quantify a mystery that was designed to defy quantification. Alongside these solitary quests, more formal archaeological surveys have been conducted, applying rigorous science to the soil around these legendary sites. Researchers use ground-penetrating radar and core sampling, searching not for the sword itself, but for any evidence of the world that could have inspired its tale. At Tintagel, excavations have uncovered the remains of a sophisticated 5th or 6th century settlement, a place of wealth and power fit for a great Celtic ruler. Fragments of fine glass and pottery from the Mediterranean prove this was no backwater, but a seat of a powerful chieftain who traded across continents. This is the kind of historical reality that could, over centuries, be woven into the golden thread of the Arthurian legend. But what of the lakes themselves? Surveys around Dosmery Pool have revealed ancient ritual activity, with Bronze Age artifacts suggesting it was a sacred site for millennia before the name Arthur was ever spoken. This is a tantalizing find. It suggests that the location was chosen for the legend not at random, but precisely because it already held a deep, pre-existing power in the human psyche. It was a place where people had long communed with the otherworld, making it the perfect setting for the Lady of the Lake to operate. The findings, however, remain stubbornly inconclusive. No cache of Dark Age weapons has been found at the bottom of Dosmery Pool. No inscription bearing Arthur's name has been unearthed at Low Pool. Archaeology can illuminate the backdrop, but it cannot conjure the protagonist. It can show us a stage where a great drama could have happened, but it cannot produce the leading actor or his magical prop. This is the frustrating yet beautiful boundary where history meets myth. The evidence tells us that a powerful leader existed in the right place and time to become the seed of the legend, but the sword, the central symbol of his power, remains forever out of reach, deliberately placed by the story itself just beyond the grasp of any trowel or metal detector. Dosmary Pool holds its legend like the deep water holds the cold. This isolated body of water on the vast expanse of Bodmin Moor is a place of stark and somber beauty, its surface often a sheet of leaden grey reflecting a brooding sky. The local folklore is unwavering. For generations, the people of Cornwall have pointed to this very spot and declared it the lake where Sir Bedivere's arm finally released its sacred burden. The tales speak of more than just a single act of return. They whisper of the sword's enduring presence, a ghostly glimmer in the murky depths. On certain nights when the moon is full and the water is unnaturally still, villagers claim to see a faint, golden light shimmering far below the surface. It is a brief, tantalizing flash, like a jewel catching a stray beam of light from a world above, only to vanish when you try to focus on it. Some say it is the pommel of Excalibur itself, forever waiting in its watery vault. Other stories are more direct, recounting the experiences of fishermen who have felt an impossible weight on their lines, as if they had hooked something ancient and metallic, only for the line to go slack and the prize to be lost. The atmosphere at Dosmary feeds these stories. There are no trees to soften its edges, just the relentless wind sweeping across the moor. The pool feels ancient and watchful, a natural cathedral that demands a hushed reverence. This pervasive sense of the uncanny makes every ripple seem significant and every odd reflection a potential message from the past. It is a landscape that actively collaborates with the legend, encouraging the eye to see what the heart already believes. The very resistance of the pool to modern searches only strengthens the local conviction that the sonar shows nothing and the metal detectors find only junk is not proof of absence, but rather proof of the sword's supernatural nature. The people here understand that some treasures are not meant to be dragged into the light. They are meant to remain as possibilities, as glimmers in the dark water that keep the legend and its hope alive. Perhaps the most compelling theory is that the sword never vanished because it was never truly there to begin with. What if Excalibur was never a physical blade of enchanted steel, but a brilliant and powerful metaphor, a story crafted to explain the very nature of rightful power? This idea suggests the sword was a symbol for the divine right of kings, a concept that gave a ruler his authority not through election or conquest, but through a direct, unbreakable bond with God. In a world without constitutions or democratic mandates, how else could you prove you were the true, chosen leader? You would need a sign, something undeniable and miraculous. A sword drawn from a stone by no man's hand or given by a spirit from a lake served as that perfect, tangible proof of a heavenly mandate. Its unbreakable quality represented the perceived permanence of that God-given right, while its brilliant light was the illumination of justice and order it was meant to bring. The legendary scabbard that prevented blood loss takes on a profound new meaning in this light. It becomes a metaphor for the king's sacred duty to preserve peace and stability, to protect the kingdom from the bleeding wounds of war and chaos. A good king did not need to constantly fight. His very reign was a shield for his people. So what then does the sword's disappearance represent? It is not the loss of a weapon, but the shattering of an idea. The return of Excalibur to the lake could symbolize the catastrophic end of a specific royal bloodline, a dynasty whose divine mandate died with its last king. It marks the collapse of the belief that power flows from a sacred, supernatural source, leaving behind a more cynical world where rule is determined by sheer force and political maneuvering. There is another, more technological interpretation. What if the legend of Excalibur preserves the memory of a real historical advantage in warfare, a secret so potent it seemed like magic? The Celts and early Britons were master ironworkers, and the process of pattern welding, where different grades of iron are twisted and forged together, could create a blade with a distinctive, shimmering pattern along its surface, a blade that was stronger, more flexible, and far more deadly than anything an ordinary soldier carried. To a warrior facing such a weapon, it would indeed appear unbreakable, its gleaming, watery pattern easily inspiring tales of a blade forged under a lake or by otherworldly smiths. The sword's legendary sharpness would simply be the result of superior metallurgy, a technology that was lost or forgotten after the fall of the civilization that perfected it. The disappearance of Excalibur, in this view, is the loss of that advanced knowledge. When the Roman order collapsed and Britain fragmented into Dark Age warring kingdoms, the sophisticated workshops that produced such high-quality weapons may have vanished. The secret of making the perfect sword was lost, surviving only in folklore as the story of a magical blade that was returned to the water, its formula sleeping forever with the Lady of the Lake. This theory transforms the myth into a poetic memory of a real technological golden age, a time when one kingdom's smiths held a power so great it became the stuff of legend, and its loss was felt so deeply that it was woven into the very fabric of the nation's story. The legend of the sword's return to the water is a powerful ending, but what if that was only a clever cover story? A different kind of mystery suggests the blade never rested in the lake at all, but was instead retrieved and concealed by a powerful, secretive order. Among the most persistent of these theories points directly to the Knights Templar. This medieval order of warrior monks, famed for their military prowess and vast financial network, was also obsessed with relics. They were rumored to have excavated beneath the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, seeking artifacts of immense spiritual power. Could a knight returning from the Crusades have discovered Excalibur, or a sword claimed to be Excalibur, and brought it back to Europe? Proponents of this idea argue the Templars would have recognized the sword not just as a weapon, but as the ultimate symbol of divine right to rule. Controlling such a symbol would grant them unimaginable influence over the crowns of Europe. The timing is certainly suggestive. The Templar Order was dissolved in the early 14th century in a sudden, violent purge by King Philip IV of France. Could part of the king's motivation have been to seize a legendary artifact they were rumored to possess? When the Templars were arrested, however, no such sword was found in their treasuries. This absence only fuels the speculation. Perhaps the most guarded relic of all was smuggled away before the arrests, hidden in a secret location known only to a few initiated brothers. This theory often intertwines with the mystery of Rosslyn Chapel in Scotland, a structure teeming with enigmatic carvings that some believe point to hidden Templar treasures. Is one of those stone vaults the final resting place of a blade that once belonged to a king? The speculation does not end with the Templars. Other secret societies, like the Freemasons, who inherited some of the Templars' mystical symbolism and lore, are also cast as potential guardians. Their rituals are filled with symbolism of the builder's tools, but also with the imagery of the sword as an instrument of justice and truth. Could the story of a lost sword of power have been integrated into their secret teachings, its physical form kept safe for a future time of global need? These conspiracy theories, while lacking in concrete evidence, tap into a deep and universal human narrative. They reflect our suspicion that history is not just what is written in books, but also what is whispered in shadows. They propose that objects of immense power are too dangerous for the public world and must be managed by a hidden elite. The idea transforms the sword's disappearance from a magical withdrawal into a deliberate act of preservation by human hands. It suggests that Excalibur is not sleeping in a mystical lake, but in a vault of stone, waiting not for a king's return, but for the right moment in a secret, centuries-long plan. The legend of Excalibur refuses to be confined to dusty manuscripts. It lives and breathes in the flickering light of a movie screen, its image reshaped for every new generation. The classic Disney animation, The Sword in the Stone, introduced countless children to a whimsical, charming version of the tale. Here, the magic was playful, with a bumbling but good-hearted young Arthur, known as Wart, and a wise, eccentric Merlin. The pivotal moment of pulling the sword is almost an accident, a desperate solution to retrieve a forgotten weapon for his foster brother. This interpretation softens the divine right of kings into a story about hidden potential and inner worth, suggesting that the true king was not the strongest but the most pure of heart. It made the legend accessible, planting a seed of wonder in young minds. Then, decades later, the film Excalibur arrived with the force of a thunderclap. Director John Boorman presented a stark, visceral, and deeply mystical vision. This was not a children's fable. The landscape was muddy and brutal, the armor was heavy and real, and the magic was primal and dangerous. In this version, Excalibur itself is a character, its green glow a constant, haunting presence. The Lady of the Lake is an ethereal and terrifying force, and the sword's connection to the health of the land is made explicit. When Arthur is wounded, the land withers. When he is restored, it blooms. This film took the metaphor of the sword as a symbol of sovereign responsibility and made it breathtakingly literal, cementing the legend's dark, tragic grandeur for an adult audience. And then, in a bizarre but telling twist, the sword even made a cameo in a blockbuster robot franchise. In Transformers: The Last Knight, the plot reveals that Merlin was not a wizard, but a drunkard given advanced alien technology. Excalibur is the key that unlocks this power, a literal transformer itself. While this might seem like a jarring departure, it proves the incredible adaptability of the myth. The sword is such a powerful symbol that it can be inserted into any narrative about hidden power and world-saving destiny, from ancient Britain to a sci-fi battlefield. These wildly different interpretations do more than just entertain. They keep the central mystery of the sword vibrantly alive. Each retelling asks the same fundamental question in a new way. What does it mean to be worthy of ultimate power? Is it about purity, like in the Disney film? Is it about forging a painful connection to the land itself, as in Excalibur? Or is it simply about having the right key at the right time, as the Transformers movie suggests? By constantly reimagining the blade, popular culture ensures we never stop looking for the answer, forever drawn back to the shore of that dark lake, wondering what form the sword will take when it rises again. That deep, almost primal need for a mystery like Excalibur is not a sign of gullibility, but a fundamental part of being human. We are hardwired to seek patterns and find meaning, especially in the empty spaces history leaves behind. The unresolved fate of the sword taps directly into a collective yearning for three profound things: a lost golden age, a hidden truth, and a persistent, undying hope. We ache for the idea of a time when the world was more just, more orderly, and more magical. The era of Camelot represents this perfect, fleeting moment, a society governed by chivalry and illuminated by a divine right to rule. Its disappearance creates a nostalgic wound, a sense that we have fallen from a higher state. The vanished sword is the perfect emblem of that loss. It is the tangible proof that such a time existed, and its absence from our world explains why our own age feels so comparatively gray and chaotic. We are not just missing a weapon, we are missing the standard by which all other power should be measured. This connects to our powerful desire for hidden truths. In a world saturated with information where so much is known and catalogued, the idea that a secret of this magnitude could still be out there is incredibly compelling. It suggests that reality has a hidden layer, a deeper magic that our modern science and skepticism have not yet managed to explain away. The lake that swallowed Excalibur is more than a body of water. It is a metaphor for the unknown itself, the vast reservoir of all the things we have not yet discovered or understood. This is why we keep searching, both literally with metal detectors and figuratively in our stories. The search itself is a form of faith, a declaration that the world is still a place of wonder. But the most powerful pull of this legend is the hope it sustains. The story of Arthur sleeping in Avalon and Excalibur waiting in the lake is a promise. It tells us that ultimate goodness and rightful power are not destroyed, only withdrawn. They are preserved, held in trust for a time of great need. This is an immensely comforting thought. It means that the solutions to our most profound crises, the symbols of justice and unity we so desperately lack, might not need to be built from scratch. They might already exist, sleeping just beneath the surface of our perception, waiting for the right moment or the right person to call them forth. The mystery of the lost sword gives us permission to believe in a second chance for the world. It allows us to look at a dark, still lake and see not an ending but a promise of return. The romantic image of a gleaming blade resting on a lakebed for centuries is a beautiful dream, but science tells a very different story. To understand why, we must examine the very substance of a Dark Age sword. The legendary Excalibur would not have been the polished steel we imagine from later medieval times. It would have been forged from iron, a metal notoriously vulnerable to the elements. The process of corrosion begins almost the moment the metal meets water and oxygen. In the environment of a freshwater lake, an iron sword would undergo a relentless chemical attack. The water itself, especially if it is even slightly acidic from peat or decaying plant matter, acts as an electrolyte, facilitating a reaction between the iron and dissolved oxygen. This process, known as aqueous corrosion, would systematically convert the strong metallic iron into a soft, flaky, reddish-brown compound, iron oxide, which we commonly call rust. Within a few decades, the blade would be heavily pitted and weakened. After 100 years, it would likely be a brittle, crumbling shell of its former self. And after 1,500 years, the entire structure would have most likely disintegrated completely, returning to the earth as a stain of orange sediment, indistinguishable from the natural minerals in the lake bottom. The idea of a perfectly preserved sword, its hilt still gleaming with gold and jewels, is a physical impossibility. The precious metals might survive, but they would simply be loose decorations settled in the muck, long detached from the iron core that had vanished. This stark reality does not destroy the legend, but it does transform our understanding of it. If the sword could not survive, then its return to the lake was never about physical preservation. It was about something far more profound, a symbolic dissolution that completes the cycle of power loaned and then reclaimed by the earth itself. This timeless suspension of both king and sword forms the core of the Arthurian promise. Avalon is not a final resting place, but a sanctuary beyond the reach of decay and the linear flow of history. It exists in a state of perpetual potential, a place where wounds are not healed in the conventional sense, but held in a magical stasis, frozen at the very moment before death can claim its victory. Arthur sleeps there not as a corpse, but as a living man caught in an enchanted slumber, his body preserved along with the hope of his return. The sword, resting in the equally timeless depths of the lake, exists in a parallel state. The same mystical forces that protect Avalon from the erosion of centuries also guard the blade from the relentless chemistry of rust and decay that would have claimed any ordinary weapon. They are two halves of a single battery, a source of power kept in perfect reserve. The sword's brilliance is not fading under the water, it is being conserved, its light stored away like a seed waiting for the right season to sprout. This is why the legend speaks of a specific condition for their return, Britain's greatest hour of need. It is not a vague prophecy, but a precise trigger mechanism. The king and his symbol of power are linked to the fate of the land itself. They are an emergency resource, a national talisman held in trust, to be deployed only when all other hope is lost, when the very identity of the nation is on the brink of annihilation. Think of it as a cosmic failsafe. The withdrawal of Excalibur was not an act of abandonment, but the ultimate strategic retreat. By removing the sword from the temporal world, the ancient magic ensured it could never be corrupted, never be misused by a lesser ruler, and never lose its potency. It was placed in a vault that time cannot touch, so that its power would be undiminished when the call finally comes. The legend, therefore, transforms a tragic ending into an enduring vigil. We are not mourning a lost king and a vanished sword. We are waiting with them. Every national crisis, every moment of profound uncertainty, subconsciously asks the same question. Is this the darkness deep enough? Is this the hour of need great enough to stir the waters of the lake and awaken the sleeper in Avalon? The mystery of the Disappearance is in its final, most beautiful form, a story about hope deferred but never extinguished, a promise written not in stone, but in the very fabric of the land, waiting for its moment to be fulfilled. The true power of Excalibur was never in its steel, but in the ideas it forged. This single legend has shaped the very identity of a nation, its imagery woven into the fabric of British monarchy and national pride. For centuries, the concept of a sword granting divine right to rule was a potent tool for kings seeking to legitimize their power, creating an unbroken line of authority that stretched back into the mists of legend. The sword became more than a story. It became a symbol of the kingdom itself, a promise of order and justice that the state was meant to uphold. This foundational myth then seeded the entire landscape of modern fantasy. Think of the glowing blades of Middle-earth, the hereditary lightsabers of the Jedi, or the Valyrian steel swords of Westeros. Every one of these iconic weapons is a direct descendant of Excalibur, each carrying a fragment of its original magic. They are not merely tools for combat, they are objects of destiny, physical proof of a hero's chosen path and their inner worth. The story provided a blueprint, a narrative structure where a weapon is not just found but earned, and with it, the heavy responsibility to wield its power justly. Why does this particular template resonate so deeply across time and culture? It speaks to a universal longing for clarity in a morally complex world. In our reality, power is often ambiguous, its origins murky and its wielders flawed. But the myth of Excalibur offers a purer vision. It tells us that true authority is not taken by force but bestowed as a sacred trust. It assures us that the universe itself has a mechanism for identifying the righteous leader, and that this leader will be equipped with a power proportionate to the challenges they face. The sword's enduring legacy is this unwavering hope. It is the belief that a tool for perfect justice exists, even if it is lost or sleeping, and that the potential for a golden age is never truly gone, only waiting for the right hand to draw it forth once more. We have journeyed from the blood-soaked field of Camlann to the silent depths of a misty lake, from the pages of ancient manuscripts to the high-tech surveys of modern archaeology. We have seen the sword as a symbol of divine right, a lost piece of advanced technology, and a treasure guarded by secret societies. We have watched it evolve from a fiery blade of Celtic judgment into the radiant icon of chivalry, its story endlessly retold in film and literature. This entire exploration circles a single, profound question, a mystery that lies at the heart of the legend itself. Is the true power of Excalibur, its real magic, dependent on it ever having been a physical object of steel and gems? Or does its ultimate strength lie precisely in its disappearance, in its transformation into a perfect, untouchable story? A real sword can be lost, broken, or stolen. Its metal will inevitably rust, returning to the earth from which it was forged. But a story, especially one as potent as this, is immortal. It cannot be corroded by time or shattered by force. It lives in the space between what we know and what we feel, between history and hope. It gives us a symbol for justice that is never fully achieved, for leadership that is never fully realized, and for a power that is never fully corrupted because it is never fully possessed. This story invites every one of us to become a modern-day Bedivere, standing at the water's edge, contemplating what we would do with such a responsibility. It asks us to look into our own world and wonder where our own symbols of hope and unity might be sleeping. So we leave this mystery with you. Where do you believe the true essence of Excalibur resides? Do you think its legend is a faded memory of a real, lost artifact, or is the story itself the real, enduring magic? Share your own theories and your favorite Arthurian tales in the comments below. The quest for meaning, after all, is a story that never ends.